The Tuscan sun, once a symbol of warmth and joy, now feels like a burning brand on my skin. 5 years. 5 years I've waited, the phantom scent of lavender clinging to my clothes, a constant reminder of the day they sentenced me to a living H3LL. I remember the sterile white walls, the taste of the pills they forced down my throat, the echoing silence that became my only companion. They stole my life, my sanity, my very identity, and they did it all with a smile. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to cherish you, subscribe now and join our family. My name is Ilara, and my story begins with what I thought was a dream come true, a lavish birthday trip to Italy with my parents, Richard and Evelyn. I was turning 25, and they had planned every detail, or so I believed. Looking back, the trip felt meticulously orchestrated, a carefully constructed stage play with me as the unwitting star. From the moment we arrived in Florence, I was swept away in a whirlwind of private tours, fine dining, and designer shopping. It felt distracting, a way to keep me occupied while they set their plan in motion. They insisted on handling everything, my passport, my phone, even my itinerary. "Just relax, darling," Evelyn would say, her smile too bright, too practiced. "We want you to fully enjoy yourself." I trusted them, I truly did. I believed their overbearing nature stemmed from love, their constant critiques from concern. They were my parents, after all. Weren't they supposed to protect me? 5 days into the trip, the carefully constructed facade began to crumble. We were in a picturesque town, its ancient cobblestone streets winding like secrets. My parents announced a surprise appointment, a wellness consultation they had arranged. Richard's eyes held a strange glint, a coldness I had never seen before. A wave of unease washed over me, but their insistence was unwavering. They led me to a sterile, modern building that seemed jarringly out of place amidst the medieval architecture. The air inside was heavy with the scent of antiseptic, a clinical smell that made my stomach churn. We were ushered into a small, sparsely furnished room. A woman in a white coat, her face impassive, sat behind a desk. My parents spoke to her rapidly in Italian, a language I only partially understood. I caught words like difficult, unstable, and for her own good. My heart began to pound in my chest. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Richard turned to me, his face devoid of any warmth. "Ilara, darling, this is for your health. You've been struggling. We've arranged for you to get the help you need." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Struggling? I had a good job, a loving boyfriend, a vibrant social life. Yes, I worked hard, but I was happy. "What are you talking about?" "I'm fine." My voice rose in desperation. Evelyn stepped forward, her hand outstretched, but her touch felt like ice. "Sweetheart, we know what's best. You'll thank us one day." Before I could fully grasp the horror unfolding, 2 large men in white uniforms entered the room. They moved with an unsettling efficiency. My parents simply watched, their faces betraying no emotion. Panic seized me. I began to struggle, to scream, but my words were lost in the unfamiliar Italian language. I felt a sharp prick in my arm, a dizzying rush, and then darkness. I awoke in a muted gray light, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. I was in a small room, sparsely furnished with a narrow bed bolted to the floor and a small, barred window. My clothes were gone, replaced by a scratchy cotton gown. My head throbbed, and a chilling realization began to dawn on me. This was no wellness retreat. This was a psychiatric hospital. And my parents had put me here. Days turned into weeks, a monotonous cycle of bland food, mind-numbing medication, and the suffocating weight of my confinement. I was trapped in a foreign country, stripped of my freedom, my identity, my voice. My frantic attempts to explain myself were met with blank stares or pitying smiles from the staff. They saw a distressed young woman, babbling in broken Italian, undoubtedly confirming her instability. The more I protested, the more agitated I became, the more they seemed to believe my parents' fabricated narrative. I was a prisoner, utterly and completely. My mind, initially consumed by shock and terror, slowly began to harden. Despair was a constant companion, but beneath it, a tiny ember of rage began to glow. How could they? How could my own parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, betray me so profoundly? What had I done to deserve this? I replayed every memory, every argument, every perceived slight. They had never approved of my boyfriend, Liam, accusing him of distracting me from my career. They had disapproved of my choice to study art history instead of law, even though I excelled at it. Was this their twisted punishment for daring to live a life of my own choosing? For defying their carefully laid plans? The person I trusted most was one of them. The medication numbed my mind, blurring the edges of reality, but it couldn't extinguish the burning anger that simmered within. Sleep became a luxury, stolen moments between the relentless waves of despair. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the silence amplifying the echoes of my parents' betrayal. Every creak of the building, every whispered conversation in the hallway, fueled my paranoia. Were they watching me? Were they monitoring my every move? I began to hoard the pills they gave me, concealing them beneath my mattress, a small act of defiance, a tiny flicker of control in a world where I had none. I knew it was a dangerous game, but the thought of having some power, however small, gave me a perverse sense of comfort. I needed to find a way out, to prove my sanity, to expose their lies. I started observing the staff, studying their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. There was a young nurse, Sophia, who seemed kinder than the others, her eyes holding a hint of empathy. I decided to focus my efforts on her, hoping to find an ally in this desolate place. I began by asking her small favors, an extra blanket, a book in English, anything to establish a connection. I told her about my life back home, about my job, my friends, my boyfriend, painting a picture of a normal, happy existence. I carefully avoided mentioning my parents, sensing that it was a sensitive subject. One afternoon, as she was taking my vitals, I whispered, "Sophia, please, you have to believe me. I don't belong here. My parents, they've made a mistake." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Elara, I understand you're upset, but your parents are very concerned about you. They want you to get better." "Better?" I scoffed, the bitterness rising in my throat. "I'm not sick. I'm being held here against my will. Please, can you just make a phone call? To my boyfriend, Liam? He'll tell you the truth." Sophia hesitated, her gaze darting around the room. I can't do that. It's against the rules. Please, I begged, my voice cracking. It's my only hope. I saw a flicker of compassion in her eyes, but it quickly vanished. "I'm sorry, Elara. I can't help you." She finished taking my vitals and hurried out of the room, leaving me alone with my despair. My attempt to reach out had failed, reinforcing the crushing reality of my isolation. I was on my own. The days continued to bleed into one another, each one a mirror image of the last. The medication dulled my senses, but it couldn't erase the memories, the images of my parents' faces as they condemned me to this living nightmare. I resolved to stop taking the pills, to regain control of my mind, to sharpen my focus. It was a slow, agonizing process. Withdrawal symptoms plagued me, headaches, nausea, tremors, but I persevered, fueled by the burning desire for revenge. As my mind cleared, I began to formulate a plan. I needed information, evidence, something to prove my sanity and expose my parents' deception. I started paying closer attention to my surroundings, observing the staff, eavesdropping on their conversations, searching for any clue that could help me. I noticed that the head doctor, Dr. Rossi, often left his office door ajar. During my daily walks in the courtyard, I would sneak glances inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of his computer screen or any documents that might be of use. One afternoon, while the staff was distracted by a commotion in the cafeteria, I seized my opportunity. I slipped away from the group and darted into Dr. Rossi's office. My heart pounded in my chest as I frantically searched through his desk. Files, folders, medical journals, nothing of immediate use. Then, I spotted it, a small, locked drawer. I rummaged through the desk for a key, my hands trembling with anticipation. Finally, I found it, tucked away in a corner. I inserted the key into the lock and turned. The drawer opened. Inside, I found a file with my name on it. I quickly scanned the documents, my eyes widening in disbelief. There were letters from my parents, detailing my condition, exaggerating my anxieties, fabricating incidents of erratic behavior. There were also bank statements, showing large sums of money being transferred from my parents' account to Dr. Rossi's. It was all there, in black and white, the conspiracy, the lies, the bribery. I had the evidence I needed. But how could I get it out? As I was contemplating my next move, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic seized me. I quickly stuffed the documents into my gown and closed the drawer, just as Dr. Rossi entered the office. He looked at me with suspicion, his eyes narrowing. "Elara, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice sharp. I stammered, trying to come up with a plausible explanation. I was just looking for the nurse. I needed some medication. He didn't believe me, I could see it in his eyes. He took a step closer, his gaze fixed on my gown. "What are you hiding?" he demanded. I knew I was caught. There was no escape. In a desperate act of defiance, I bolted towards the door, hoping to outrun him. But he was too fast. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. I struggled, trying to break free, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the office and slammed me against the wall. The documents fell from my gown, scattering across the floor. Dr. Rossi's eyes widened as he recognized them. His face turned crimson with rage. "You little," he spat, his voice trembling. He reached for the intercom on his desk. "Guards! Get in here now." I knew what was coming. They would take me away, lock me up, increase my medication. My opportunity had been lost, my hope extinguished. But as I stood there, waiting for the guards to arrive, a new emotion began to rise within me, a cold, unwavering determination. They may have taken my freedom, my sanity, but they would not break my spirit. I would find a way to expose them, to make them pay for what they had done. This was not the end. It was just the beginning. They dragged me away. The guards were like stone, their faces impassive, their grip unyielding. Dr. Rossi watched, a cruel satisfaction twisting his lips. They took me to a room I hadn't seen before, a stark, windowless cell deep within the bowels of the hospital. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the stench of mildew and despair. The walls were padded, the floor bare. There was nothing in the room except a small, metal cot bolted to the floor. This was it. This was the end. They had broken me, silenced me, and now they were going to bury me alive. They threw me into the room and slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the suffocating silence. I curled up on the cot, my body racked with sobs. The tears flowed freely, a torrent of grief, anger, and despair. I had failed. I had come so close to exposing them, but my efforts had been thwarted. Now, I was trapped, with no hope of escape. The medication they forced upon me was stronger now, a heavy blanket smothering my thoughts, blurring the edges of reality. I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by nightmares, reliving the moment of betrayal, the faces of my parents as they condemned me to this living tomb. Days turned into an indistinguishable mass, a gray blur of nothingness. I lost track of time, losing myself in the depths of my despair. I stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped caring. What was the point? They had taken everything from me. My life was over. I was nothing but a shell, a ghost haunting the corridors of my own mind. One evening, as I lay on the cot, staring blankly at the padded wall, a memory surfaced, a fragment from my childhood. I was sitting at my grandmother's knee, listening to her tell stories of resilience, of overcoming adversity, of fighting for what you believe in. She had been a strong woman, a survivor, a beacon of hope in a world of darkness. Her words had always inspired me, but now they seemed distant, irrelevant. What did resilience matter when you were trapped in a padded cell, your mind poisoned by medication, your spirit broken? And yet, something flickered within me, a tiny spark of defiance. My grandmother's spirit, her unwavering strength, refused to be extinguished. I thought of Liam, his kind eyes, his gentle smile, the love we shared. I thought of my friends, their laughter, their loyalty, the joy they brought into my life. I thought of my art, the passion that burned within me, the creative energy that had always sustained me. They had tried to erase me, to silence me, to break me. But they had failed. Because I was still here. And I was not going to give up. The realization washed over me like a tidal wave, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I would not let them win. I would not let them destroy me. I would fight back, with every fiber of my being. I would find a way to escape, to expose them, to reclaim my life. The anger that had been simmering within me for so long now blazed into a raging inferno. My vision blurred. The metal cot beneath me groaned under the force of my clenched fists. It was time to stop wallowing in despair and start planning my revenge. I started small, forcing myself to eat, to drink, to move. I refused the medication, spitting it out when the nurses weren't looking. It was a slow, agonizing process, but gradually, my mind began to clear, my senses sharpened. I started observing my surroundings again, paying attention to the details, searching for any weakness, any opportunity. The padded cell, once a symbol of my confinement, now became my sanctuary, my training ground. I began to exercise, pushing my body to its limits, building my strength, preparing for the battle ahead. I started to formulate a plan, a complex web of deceit, manipulation, and calculated risk. I would use their arrogance against them, their belief in their own invincibility. I would become the ghost in the machine, the silent saboteur, the architect of their downfall. I knew it would be a long and arduous journey, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But I was prepared to do whatever it took. They had stolen my life, my sanity, my identity. Now, I was going to take theirs. One day, a new doctor came to see me. Dr. Moreau was young, ambitious, eager to make a name for himself. He had heard about my case, about the mysterious young woman locked away in the padded cell. He saw an opportunity, a chance to prove his brilliance, to unlock the secrets of the human mind. He started visiting me regularly, asking questions, probing my thoughts, trying to understand my condition. I played along, feigning compliance, pretending to be delusional, feeding him carefully crafted lies. I knew that Dr. Moreau was my ticket out of this place. He was arrogant, easily manipulated, and desperate for validation. I would use him, exploit him, and then discard him like a broken toy. The day they tried to erase me was the day they created a monster. They thought they had broken me. They were wrong. I was stronger than ever. The game had changed. And I was about to rewrite the rules. The day they thought they silenced me was the day my real game began. I smiled at Dr. Moreau, played the part of the broken woman. But inside, I was meticulously crafting my escape, every word, every gesture, a calculated step. My padded cell became my theater, and Dr. Moreau, my unwitting audience. I told him stories of imagined horrors, weaving elaborate tales of persecution and paranoia, all carefully designed to reinforce the narrative my parents had created. I knew he was recording our sessions, documenting my every word, eager to publish his findings. That was exactly what I wanted. I needed him to believe I was insane, a danger to myself and others. The more convinced he was, the easier it would be to manipulate him. I started subtly suggesting that my parents were responsible for my condition, hinting at their controlling behavior, their obsession with my career, their disapproval of Liam. I painted them as villains, masterminds behind my supposed mental breakdown. Dr. Moreau ate it up, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He saw himself as my savior, the one who could finally expose the truth and free me from their clutches. Little did he know, he was merely a pawn in my game. Every night, after Dr. Morrow left, I would replay our conversations in my mind, analyzing his reactions, fine-tuning my performance. I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move could blow my cover and ruin everything. I began to hoard my medication again, not to numb my mind, but to use as a bargaining chip. I would pretend to take the pills, then secretly spit them out, collecting them in a small container hidden beneath my cot. I knew they could be useful later, either as a sedative for someone else or as a way to fake an overdose and gain sympathy. One afternoon, during our session, Dr. Morrow mentioned that my parents were planning to visit me. My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I knew I had to act fast. I told Dr. Morrow that I was terrified of seeing them, that I feared they would try to force me to undergo more treatments, to further control my life. I begged him to protect me, to keep them away. He hesitated, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He saw this as an opportunity to prove his loyalty to me, to solidify his position as my savior. He agreed to speak with my parents, to try to convince them to postpone their visit. I knew he wouldn't succeed. My parents were too determined to keep me locked away. But that wasn't the point. The point was to create a conflict, to sow seeds of doubt in Dr. Morrow's mind, to make him question their motives. The next day, Dr. Morrow came to see me, his face flushed with anger. He told me that he had spoken with my parents, but they had refused to listen to him. They were insistent on seeing me, and they had even threatened to report him to the hospital board if he tried to interfere. I pretended to be distraught, my voice trembling with fear. I told him that I was convinced my parents were trying to destroy me, that they wouldn't stop until I was completely broken. I suggested that they might even try to have me declared legally incompetent, so they could take control of my assets. Dr. Morrow's eyes widened. He knew that my parents were wealthy, and he realized that there was a lot at stake. He started to see them not as concerned parents, but as greedy manipulators, willing to do anything to protect their fortune. I pressed my advantage, telling him that I had evidence to prove their deception, documents that I had hidden before I was committed. I said that I needed his help to retrieve them, to expose their lies to the world. Dr. Morrow was intrigued. He saw this as an opportunity to strike a blow against my parents, to cement his reputation as a champion of justice. He agreed to help me, but he insisted that we had to be careful, that we couldn't trust anyone. I smiled inwardly. He was exactly where I wanted him. Over the next few days, I shared more details of my plan with Dr. Morrow, carefully crafting each element to appeal to his ego and his sense of righteousness. I told him that the documents were hidden in my parents' house, in a secret safe that only I knew about. I said that we would need to break into the house, find the safe, and retrieve the evidence. Dr. Morrow was hesitant at first, but I convinced him that it was the only way to expose the truth and protect me from my parents. I told him that I had studied their security system, that I knew its weaknesses, that I could disable it with the right tools. I even drew up detailed blueprints of the house, highlighting the location of the safe and the security cameras. Dr. Morrow was impressed by my knowledge and my meticulous planning. He started to believe that I was not insane, but a brilliant strategist, a victim of a cruel and elaborate conspiracy. The night of the break-in arrived. Dr. Morrow managed to get me a temporary release from the hospital, claiming that I needed to undergo a special therapy session at a remote location. We drove to my parents' house in his car, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine. As we approached the house, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment of truth. I disabled the security system with a device I had fashioned from parts scavenged from the hospital's electronics lab. We slipped inside the house, moving silently through the darkened rooms. I led Dr. Morrow to my father's study, where the safe was hidden behind a bookshelf. I knew the combination, I had memorized it years ago. I opened the safe, and inside, we found a stack of documents. I quickly scanned them, confirming that they were the ones I needed. There were letters from my parents to Dr. Rossi, detailing their plan to have me committed. There were bank statements showing the payments they had made to him. There were even transcripts of phone calls in which they discussed their motives and their lies. I took the documents and placed them in a bag I had brought with me. We left the house as quickly and quietly as we had entered, leaving no trace of our presence. Back in Dr. Moreau's car, I felt a sense of triumph rising within me. I had the evidence I needed to expose my parents and reclaim my life. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The real revenge was yet to come. The day they tried to bury me was the day they planted the seeds of their own destruction. And I was about to watch them reap what they had sown. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. My parents' cold, calculating plan was laid bare in black and white. They had seen me as a threat, an obstacle to their ambitions, and they had decided to eliminate me, not with a weapon, but with carefully crafted lies and manipulation. The realization sent a wave of fury through me, so intense that my vision blurred. The car swerved slightly as I gripped the documents tighter, the paper crinkling in my trembling hands. Dr. Moreau, oblivious to the storm raging within me, was congratulating himself on a job well done. He believed he had rescued me, exposed the truth, and struck a blow against injustice. He had no idea that he was merely a puppet in my game, a tool to be used and then discarded. I smiled at him, a cold, empty smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you, Doctor," I said, my voice dripping with false gratitude. "You have no idea what this means to me." He beamed, basking in my praise. "I'm just glad I could help," he said. "Now, what do you want to do with the evidence?" I paused, pretending to consider my options. "I want the world to know the truth," I said finally. "I want everyone to see what my parents have done." I proposed a press conference, a public unveiling of the documents that would expose my parents' treachery. Dr. Moreau was ecstatic. He imagined the headlines, the accolades, the fame that would come with being the one who had brought down the city's most respected family. He readily agreed to arrange the press conference, using his connections in the medical community to secure a venue and invite the media. I played the part of the grateful victim, showering him with praise and affection, fueling his ego and solidifying his loyalty. I knew that my parents would be watching, that they would be desperate to stop me from exposing them. I had to make sure that they walked right into my trap. I leaked information about the press conference to a source I knew was close to my parents, hinting that I had irrefutable evidence of their crimes. I knew they would react, that they would try to silence me, one way or another. The game was set. The pieces were in place. All that was left was to wait for my parents to make their move. The days leading up to the press conference were a blur of activity. Dr. Moreau was running around like a headless chicken, arranging the logistics, coordinating with the media, and basking in the attention. I remained calm and composed, carefully managing the narrative, feeding the press carefully curated snippets of information, building anticipation for the big reveal. I knew my parents were growing increasingly desperate. I could feel their anxiety, their fear, their rage, like a dark cloud hanging over me. They made several attempts to contact me, but I refused to speak to them. I wanted them to stew in their own paranoia, to imagine the worst possible outcome. I knew they would be planning something, that they wouldn't let me expose them without a fight. I just didn't know what form their attack would take. I prepared for every eventuality, anticipating their every move, crafting countermeasures to thwart their plans. I knew this was a dangerous game, that I was playing with fire. But I was willing to risk everything to expose the truth and reclaim my life. The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the darkness that enveloped my heart. As I dressed, I felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet determination that steeled my nerves. I knew this was the culmination of everything I had been working towards, the moment of truth that would determine my future. I arrived at the venue, a small auditorium packed with journalists, cameras, and onlookers. The air crackled with anticipation. Dr. Moreau greeted me with a nervous smile, his eyes wide with excitement. He led me to the stage, where a podium had been set up, adorned with microphones and the hospital's logo. As I stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes were on me. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice clear and strong, resonating through the auditorium. I recounted my story, from my parents' initial attempts to control my life to their eventual decision to have me committed. I spoke of Dr. Rossi's betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, the suffering I had endured. As I spoke, I could see the emotions on the faces of the audience, the shock, the disbelief, the anger. I knew I was reaching them, that I was breaking through the wall of silence that had been built around me. Then, I presented the evidence, the documents I had retrieved from my parents' safe. I displayed them on a screen, allowing everyone to see the damning proof of their crimes. A collective gasp swept through the auditorium as the audience absorbed the shocking revelations. I knew that my parents' world was about to come crashing down around them. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one final card to play, a secret weapon that would ensure their complete and utter destruction. As I reached for the final document, a sudden commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. Security guards rushed forward, struggling to restrain two figures who were attempting to force their way through the crowd. My parents. Their faces were contorted with rage and desperation. They were shouting my name, screaming accusations, demanding that I stop the press conference immediately. I smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. They had walked right into my trap. As the security guards dragged them towards the stage, my father lunged forward, his hand outstretched. In his hand, he held a syringe filled with a clear liquid. He was aiming for me. My blood ran cold. This was it. The moment of truth. But as he reached me, a figure stepped in front of me, shielding me from the attack. Dr. Moreau. The syringe plunged into his arm, and he crumpled to the ground. My father's eyes widened in horror as he realized what he had done. The crimson liquid from the syringe slowly started trickling down Dr. Moreau's arm. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion and betrayal. And then, everything went black. The world swam back into focus, a chaotic tableau of flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and the horrifying tableau of Dr. Moreau lying motionless on the stage. My parents, restrained but still struggling, were screaming denials, their faces a mask of fury and desperation. But it was my father's eyes that held my attention, a chilling mix of disbelief and dawning comprehension of the abyss he had just created for himself. The syringe, now clattering on the floor, was quickly retrieved and identified, a potent cocktail of sedatives, enough to render someone unconscious, potentially much worse if the dosage was off. His intent was clear: silence me, permanently if necessary. The press, of course, went wild. The image of Dr. Moreau, the respected psychiatrist, being taken out by my own father with a needle, became the defining image of the entire scandal, splashed across every newspaper and news website. The story instantly transcended local news, becoming a national sensation, a lurid tale of wealth, power, and betrayal. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My parents were immediately arrested, facing charges of attempted assault, conspiracy, and a host of other crimes related to their attempts to have me unlawfully committed. The evidence I had presented was irrefutable, their carefully constructed lies crumbling under the weight of their own actions. Dr. Rossi, exposed as a willing participant in their scheme, was stripped of his medical license and faced his own legal battles. The hospital where I had been held launched an internal investigation, heads rolling as the extent of the corruption and negligence was revealed. But the true devastation was etched on my parents' faces as they were led away in handcuffs, their reputations in tatters, their social standing obliterated, their fortune frozen pending investigation. The company my father had built, the empire my mother had cultivated, all vanished overnight, as their investors panicked and their allies deserted them. They lost everything, absolutely everything. I watched it all unfold, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. There was no joy, no elation, just a cold, hard satisfaction that justice had finally been served. The years of manipulation, the gaslighting, the imprisonment, the constant erosion of my sanity, it had all led to this moment. The scales had been balanced. Dr. Moreau, thankfully, survived the incident. The substances hadn't ended his life, but he was never the same. The incident ruined his career and reputation, but I made sure he had all the resources he needed to start over somewhere far away. He became a cautionary tale, a symbol of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrosive power of greed. As for me, I walked away from the wreckage, a free woman, finally able to reclaim my life. The press hounded me for a while, eager to hear my story, to understand my motivations. But I remained silent, refusing to grant interviews, to further sensationalize the events. I simply wanted to move on, to rebuild my life in peace, away from the shadows of my past. They tried to erase me. They tried to rewrite my story. But in the end, the truth prevailed. They lost everything. I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, not a joyous one, but a quiet, knowing smile. A smile that acknowledged the pain, the suffering, the sacrifices that had been made. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the only way to ensure that those who abuse their power are held accountable, that the voices of the silenced are finally heard. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.